Good evening, everyone. So today I'll talk on my talk is titled Low Resource Speech Recognition in Indian Context. Let me share my screen first. Entire screen. Is it visible, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thanks. So let me go full screen. First of all, I congratulate the organizers, the faculty of Sikkim Manipal Institute of Technology for organizing this short-term training program on advances in speech technology, opportunities and challenges. The latest advances in technology are very much, especially in the past 1 decade or so. But this is a short-term training program, and this is the first talk of this particular STTP. Therefore, I will begin with very basic concepts on one task in this technology. That is speech recognition, automatic speech recognition. Speech recognition, in common term, it is known as speech to text. So speech recognition is one of the various technologies which involves the speech signal. So, and the focus of my goal is on low resource speech recognition in the Indian context. Therefore, I will start with the basic concept of the speech recognition to begin with, some overview of the speech recognition, various models that were used till a decade ago, which are successful with the limited amount of resources. The focus is on low resource. And then we'll also talk about the deep neural networks, which have been very successful in implementing various speech systems with the high degree of accuracy and usability. Then also touching upon the basic concepts, I will talk about the automatic speech recognition with the low resources. Low resource means low speech data, their transcriptions and so on, using the traditional model, which used not only statistical model called hidden Markov model, but also neural networks, at least the basic version of the neural network. Then I will touch upon the work that is done by support from National Language Technology Mission, Government of India, and various NGOs which have put in efforts to bring speech systems in Indian languages. And at the end, I will just talk about some idea about the speech systems that are being implemented for really low resource languages, the tribal languages of India. So let's look at this, right? If India is the most populous country, and it is also a country which has lots of languages. It's a multilingual country. The number of languages is, some people say 500 or more, but let us go by what the census of Government of India says. 2011 census said that there are 121 languages which are spoken by at least 10,000 speakers. So that's their threshold that they put. Out of these 121 languages, there are 22 languages which are listed in the Schedule 8 of the Constitution, so-called scheduled languages. Now, but so there are 121 languages which are spoken by 10,000 speakers. What is the ratio of the people who speak these languages? And as expected, Hindi is spoken by around 44% of the Indians, and followed by Bengali, Marathi, and so on. And look at this language, Meitei, the Manipuri language, that is spoken by 0.15% of the people, and others are 0.1% or less, and collectively they constitute about 5% of the population of India. So we are talking about speech technology. Speech is used for communication of idea from one human being to another human being. So suppose right now I'm speaking to you, so I am the speaker, and you are listening, so you are the listener. So I am speaking about human speech communication. So I have some thought process in my brain. I chose a language, English, assuming that you also can understand that language. And the English language, I form the sequence of words, a sentence that conveys, that captures the thought, that process that is in my brain, which I want to communicate to you. So once that is done, the brain gives signals, nerve impulses to the parts of the body which are involved in producing voice, or it gives him instructions to the vocal system of the human being. And the vocal system of the human being, when person speaks, the person speaks, the sound comes out. Where does the energy for the sound is coming from? That is coming from the air in the lungs. Air in the lungs comes here, and the glottis vibrates. It gives puffs of air, and there are resonances in the vocal tract. Different sounds are produced by changing the positions and of the articulators. Let's say when I say ah, my jaw is lower. Ah, e, my jaw is upper. When I say ooh, my lips are protruded. So the air cavity inside my mouth changes its size and shape. Correspondingly, the spectral property, the sound wave that is coming out of my mouth changes. This sound gets communicated mostly through air, sometimes also on material. It requires some medium to communicate. And when it reaches your ear, the sound signals go through the ear and gets processed by the auditory system. There are three parts: outer ear, middle ear, inner ear, auditory system, and this system analyzes various properties, including spectral properties and temporal properties of the wave that is coming here. And this sends nerve signals to the brain. The listener's ear sends nerve signals to the listener's brain. From there, it recollects the words, sequence of words, that is sentence, grammatically correct sentence, and the concept. So the whole idea is concept from my brain reaches your brain. And I use one particular language. This is English. Of course, we use human language. Now, what we are talking about is automatic speech recognition. Automatic means by the machines, not by human beings. We do it effortlessly. So the speech to text is the goal of the automatic speech recognition system. So this system, the rough block diagram is as follows. The input is a waveform, something like this. Let's say a waveform. This was the waveform of the word Tiruvananthapuram, Tiruvan part of it. So this is the waveform, and you can see that the waveform on the vertical axis is the amplitude of the waveform, digit form, and on the x-axis is the time. So this is also called a time waveform, The duration of this particular word is 0.4 seconds typically. So this sound comes to the automatic speech recognition system, and the sound is processed. The digital sound is processed to extract information about which speech sound is being spoken at that particular instant of time. If the word is Tiruvan, then at different time instances, different sounds are spoken. In order to understand, this waveform consists of sequence of these sounds This waveform is processed in short segments. That is called short time processing. So the signal processing is the first step in the ASR system. Now, once the signal processing is done, the properties of various sounds are extracted from the. If we know what was spoken, then we can look at the properties of this particular waveform and attach it to and associate it with the sound E. And if the sound E occurs several times in the sentence, then we collect all the segments of the sound E, collect its features, and we build a model for the sound E. So the speech recognition is a supervised pattern recognition. Supervised pattern recognition means it is like a teacher is, think of a LKG student. The teacher writes A is, you put one line here, another line here, and put a line here. That is capital A. Teacher teaches and the student learns. So similarly, in this case of the supervised pattern recognition, the waveforms such as these are given, and the system is also told that waveform from here to here is ta, from here to here is E, and so on. So with that information, the system collects various segments of the one vowel, let's say E, and builds a model for vowel E. Similarly, it builds model for vowel A and various sounds, consonants, and so on. This process of building models from the speech signal, whose sequence of speech sounds are known, is called training. It is, you train a model using speech wave whose transcription is known. Transcription is at the word level or also at the phonic level. So, and once that is done, the system is ready for use. When somebody wants to use the system, he speaks something, the input speech, then it's called test speech because it's what was spoken is not known to the system. That speech, test speech, also goes to the same signal processing, and then it is that particular feature of that particular short segment is matched with all the 40 or so sounds or its models, and the output is the sequence of phones and the sequence of words. Okay, now if you look at this waveform, you can see that the vowel E is from here to here, and vowel O is from here to here. You can guess. But if you look at the waveform, this waveform of vowel E doesn't appear different from this waveform of vowel O. Everything is periodic. Periodicity at the pitch frequency, there is around 100 hertz, in 140 hertz in my case. So by looking at the waveform, you may not be able to easily distinguish between E and O. Therefore, but on the other hand, we know that speech is produced by resonance in the vocal tract. Therefore, its frequency properties are different. Different frequency properties of different sounds, speech sounds, consonants and vowels are different. And human ear knew this. It has evolved over the years, and human ear does the frequency analysis. So the signal processing by human auditory system is, this is the outer ear, this is the middle ear, and this is called the inner ear. Inner ear has a structure in the shape of a spiral that is called cochlea. You might have heard of cochlear implant. This is for the people whose this organ fails, then signally any sound is not processed, they cannot hear. So the cochlea does the frequency analysis. So there is this will be. So frequency analysis is done by human cochlea, and with the experience over thousands of years, millennia of years, human ear has learned to pay more attention to lower frequency sounds than higher frequency sounds. Human ear can hear sound from 20 hertz frequency to 20,000 hertz frequency. But if we look at one of the major use of listening is protection against enemies. Enemies, mostly animals. Let's say lion is coming in a forest. We were all forest dwellers earlier. Lion is coming, sound comes, low frequency sound. Human ear has to detect it very quickly. It's a protection. Life is at stake. And in general, even when we speak, there is a lot of energy in the lower frequency end of the spectrum rather than the higher frequency end. So the human auditory system uses some frequency scale which is not the linear or hertz scale. It's called Mel frequency scale. It is derived from the word melody in music. In music also, if you see Sarigama Padanisa, the frequencies are not linear. It is follows square root law. So human auditory system follows a nonlinear frequency scale and computes and measure the frequency characteristics of various sounds. And output is at one. So output is what we do is, if you look at this word Tiruvant, here is the word ta, I know, this is E, and this is Ra, this is U. So the sound changes with respect to time. It's a signal. Therefore, the properties also change. What we do is to take small segment of the speech, which is typically 25 millisecond duration, and compute its spectrum, extract its features in terms of so-called Mel frequency coefficient. That doesn't matter. That's one of the popular features. And do this not only for the first 25 millisecond, next 25 millisecond, and so on. In general, frames are shifted by 10 millisecond. Therefore, in 1 second of speech, typically there are 100 speech frames or speech segments. We call it as speech frames. Corresponding to each speech frame, you compute one Mel frequency coefficient. It's a vector of 13 coefficients. And then there are other properties also it can compute. So I talked of computing the spectrum of sound, short duration of sound. And this spectrum varies with respect to time. So the spectrum has two characteristics. One is the time, one is the frequency, and another is the amplitude. But we want to see how the spectrum, which is two-dimensional quantity, varies with respect to time. Therefore, we want a three-dimensional representation. So what people came out with is what is called a spectrogram. ECG, electrocardiogram, electroencephalogram, you have heard of it. Gram means something that's printed on a piece of paper. A paper is a two-dimensional body, but we want to represent a three-dimensional entity, which is spectrum as a function of time. Spectrum itself has frequency and amplitude. So let's look at the vowel E here, or let's look at the vowel A here. The vowel A has resonances, more energy at certain frequencies. What is the frequency? It's around 700 hertz. It has high frequency at around 700 hertz. It is shown in red color. It is also high. It also has high energy. Sorry, not high frequency, high energy at 700 hertz. Similarly, high energy at around 1500 hertz. High energy at around 3000 hertz, and so on. So these show up as peaks in the spectrum, and these are called formants. So what is shown here is formant of the vowel U is, you can see here, first formant here, second formant or capital F2 here, third formant or capital F3 here, and so on. Now notice that the different sounds have, as a function of time along the x-axis, different sounds are spoken, the corresponding waveform is here, and the spectrum also changes. So the red means more energy. Right at the beginning, there was silence, no energy at all frequencies, therefore it's all blue. Green means medium energy, and red means high energy. So you see that vowel U, for example, here, and vowel A, for example, here, they seem different. Vowel U and vowel A, you can see the difference. R does not have energy here. So different sounds are characterized by high energy at different frequencies, and this can be used to train a model for the speech sound and recognize them. So What are the traditional speech models that are used? Basic sounds that are, you can recognize the individual sounds. For example, vowels or consonants like ka, ka, ga, ga, nga, ma, na, nasals, and sa, and so. That's so you can recognize one individual sound. In which case, in case of vowels, formant frequencies are useful because if you look at the oo here, its formant frequencies are different from the formant frequency of here and here, oo here and here. So they are different. Therefore, formants can be used to recognize the vowels. But if you look at the spectrogram here, let us look at the spectrogram of the vowel oo. Vowel oo in the time waveform, it is from here to here. In the spectrum, it is from here to here. This is the spectrogram of the vowel oo. And look at the second formant frequency. It is here. It is still oo, but it continuously increases. So the vowel oo, its characteristic is not constant. It is not. It changes with respect to time. A similarity can be thought of in terms of the written language. Printed A appears exactly same, whether it is printed by that printer or this printer. But if I write A and you write A, these two A's appear different. So even in written language, the script writing, the letters vary from person to person, and it also depends upon the context, which letter comes before and after. Therefore, in the case of the vowel oo, and in general, most all the sounds, this characteristic is not constant. It varies. Whenever characteristics vary, we use statistics and you compute the average value or the mean and a measure of the spread of the values. So in the case of the vowel oo, let us say the second formant frequency F2 here is, let's say, around 1000 hertz. That is the mean value, and there is this variation spread of around plus or minus 200 hertz. So you can characterize vowel oo if second formant frequency mean value is 1200 hertz and its standard deviation is, let's say, 100 hertz and so on. That is, so it's a statistical model of speech for recognizing a single sound. On the other hand, we don't speak sound by sound. We speak a sentence. Sentence consists of words, and a word is a sequence of phonemes. Suppose the word Bharat is there. There are several sounds. B, A, R, A, T. 5 sounds are there. So the word Bharat is a sequence of 5 phonemes. So we need a method in which we have to recognize a sequential pattern, not just one sound, but sequence of several sounds. Sentence is a sequence of words, and these sequence of words are governed by language model. Therefore, in speech recognition, language model is also involved. Not only acoustic model, that is the properties that is extracted from the time waveform by the frequency analysis, but also what sequence of words are grammatically correct. Grammar, syntax, that language model is also involved. And statistics is there. Then next step is probability, and combination of probability and neural network models were used till a decade ago, and I'll briefly talk about that. The vowel recognition, I essentially talked quite a bit about this. The resonances are there. Therefore, if you look at the spectrum, here it is frequencies along the x-axis, kilohertz. So this is 1000 hertz, 2000 hertz, 3000 hertz. The two vowels, let's consider A and E. In case of the E, the first peak occurs at around 300 hertz. That I call it F1. And the second peak occurs at around 2300 hertz. So we call it as F2. In the case of the A, on the other hand, F1 occurs at around 700 hertz. Look at this peak here. And the second resonance occurs at different frequency. So we see that formants of different vowels are different. So we can use the statistical properties, mean and standard deviation. We can use it as a classifier using a distance. But notice that if you look at the F1, the first resonance frequency is first format. the second resonance frequency is the F2 of different vowels. They do occur slightly differently in the format space, but look at this particular person. Now, different people have their format frequencies are different. Why? Because suppose a adult, male adult like me, tall person speaks vowel ah, I'm tall, my head is also large, so the resonant cavity is longer, resonant frequency is smaller. So the or spoken by male adult speakers have lower frequency. On the other hand, if children speak, children are shorter, maybe 3 or 4 feet, and their head size is smaller, therefore resonant cavity length is smaller, therefore resonance frequency is higher. Therefore, the one vowel spoken by different people, their frequencies can be different. Resonance frequencies can be different depending upon their physiology. Adults will have lower frequencies, both F1 and F2, and children will have higher frequency, both F1 and F2. Because of this, there is overlap between the clusters of the vowel A and vowel E. For example, if you measure the format F1 and F2 of some sound, let's say it turns out to be 700 and 1000 hertz. Now, this particular point may be an R spoken by a child or A vowel spoken by an adult. So, there is confusion. There is an overlap between the clusters. Whenever there is an overlap between the clusters, you cannot use a statistical model with great accuracy. So, we should be able to say that a point here is A with the probability 0.8 and or with the probability 0.2 because it is more towards the A. On the other hand, a point here is or with the probability 0.7 and A with the probability 0.3. We should be able to say that. So we need a probabilistic model. And one of the common models is Gaussian distribution, whose probability density function expression is given here. It has two parameters. One, the mean, mu, of the distribution. Let's say, look at this green distribution, one vowel. This is the frequency and this is the PDF function value. So the PDF function, probability density function, shows a peak at the mean of the green vowel mu1. And on the other hand, another vowel, another sound its average value will be different. Therefore, mu2 will be different. Therefore, mu1 and mu2 of two different sounds would be different. Not only mu1 and mu2, but also the width of this bell-shaped curve. So width here is smaller, width here is larger. This is a broader curve, shorter curve, broader curve. Therefore, that is captured by the standard deviation sigma. So you can use the Gaussian distribution to model this as this cluster, each of the cluster as a Gaussian distribution, and you can use you can find out which has the higher conditional probability, and you can assign the test data to that class. So what we used was a Gaussian distribution, a probabilistic model, but that is not sufficient. Why? Let's look at the vowel A here. This is the shape of the cluster vowel A. Gaussian distribution assumes that the shape of the cluster is oval, whereas this is like the seed of a bean fruit. So this is not oval. When something is not oval, the single Gaussian distribution is not a good property. In fact, if you look at the one particular capital coefficient of one vowel, it doesn't look like a Gaussian distribution. In fact, there are multiple peaks here. So if you model this curve by a single Gaussian, it will be inappropriate. Therefore, we model it by a collection of Gaussians or a mixture of Gaussians, that is called a Gaussian mixture model. So how do you train a Gaussian mixture model? If there are, let's say, data points of one vowel, and you say that my vowel has two distributions are somewhat like this. One peak, second major peak. I want to model this by two peaks. Then there is an algorithm called expectation maximization algorithm, which automatically figures out what is the mean and centers of the two Gaussians and their shapes also. That's algorithm. So training a Gaussian mixture model from the training data is not difficult. So far we talked about recognizing one sound, but we want to recognize speech. Speech is a sequential pattern. Therefore, the models that are used are one is called dynamic time warping, which handles when I speak some sentence slowly and when I speak a sentence fast. When I speak a sentence slowly and when I speak a sentence fast. So the time duration of the same sound or same word also can vary, and this dynamic time warping model or used to handle that. And statistical model, probabilistic model, it is called a hidden Markov model, and in combination with the statistical model, the Gaussian mixture model that we talked here was being the popular model for speech recognition till recently. So we are looking at why do we need this so-called hidden Markov model. We'll briefly go through that. Speech is a time sequence. That means it changes with respect to time. It is not a board, a sign board. The contrast is between a signboard and a signal. Look at a signal. So suppose you come to Vijayawada. When you land, there will be written word Vijayawada. That never changes. That is a signboard. On the other hand, if you look at a traffic signal, it keeps changing its sign, its colors. Therefore, signal means time varying signal. Now, in time varying signal also, so that is what the definition of signal. There are two properties, two types of signals. One is called deterministic signal, like the traffic signal. So it is red for 30 seconds and then green for 17 seconds, then amber for 3 seconds. It keeps on repeating. So this how the signal change, how these colors change is determined, predetermined. It's a rule. On the other hand, think of a weather. You cannot forecast it exactly. You can only predict that tomorrow it will be rainy with the 0.7 probability and sunny with 0.2 probability and cloudy with 0.1 probability and so on. Such signals are called stochastic signals. Signals where we cannot predict what will happen in the next time instant with certainty. So we need a probabilistic model. Somebody called Markov proposed that, and that we will use it for modeling speech sounds also. First, let me ask, why do we need a Markov model? Why do you need a probabilistic model? Why do you need a stochastic model? So let us look at this word, Thiruvananthapuram, spoken here. The waveform is here. Notice that this is a Thiruvananthapuram. He didn't speak it correctly because he was a North Indian. Thiruvananthapuram, he spoke Thiruvananthapuram. Let's stick to Thiruvananthapuram. The time says time is shown here in milliseconds. This is 800 milliseconds. And different sounds spoken at different times are shown here. Let us notice that the vowel A has occurred in Thiruvan. A has occurred from here to here. This is a vowel, this is the waveform, and this is the spectrogram. But in the same word, the A has occurred another time in Puram, This is the vowel A, and this is the spectrogram of the vowel A. Firstly, notice that duration of this vowel A, the first vowel A, is shorter than the duration of this vowel A. This variation does happen. So durations can vary for the same sound. Both are A sound, not A. This is A. Secondly, let us look at the second formant frequency shown by this red curve. This is the F1, capital F1, this is capital F2. From here to here, it is vowel A. From here to here, it is vowel A. Notice the F2 is slowly increasing. It's not constant. Well, it is changing. Therefore, we need statistical model, probabilistic model. Fine. Now, but let's look at this vowel A. So we thought that A keeps on increasing. F2 will keep on increasing. But let us look at this A. This F2 is constant. And at the end, it falls down. So notice that not only for one sound, spectrum varies with the time, but its direction of variation can be increasing or constant or decreasing. And that depends upon which sound is spoken after M and which sound is spoken after A. So the how this varies, how the F2 varies depends upon which sound is spoken after A. M is spoken here, therefore the F2 of M is smaller, therefore it suddenly falls down. And before this A, the sound R was spoken, and the F2 of R and A was similar. Whereas here, in the case of the A, this first A, before the A, the sound O was spoken, its format frequency was lower. Whereas the format frequency of the N was higher. Therefore, even when A was being spoken, its spectral characteristic gets influenced by the previous sound as well as the next sound. Therefore, what I want you to remember is that although when we write A, it seems to be constant, when you speak, the characteristics change with respect to time, and it gets influenced by the previous sound and next sound. Hopefully, the middle part is less influenced by the previous and next sound. Therefore, it is better to model even one vowel A as a sequence of 3 parts. Sequence of parts, which they call it as a state in the statistical Markov model jargon. So instead of representing this particular vowel as a single unit, one probability distribution or one Gaussian distribution model, no, we'll split them into 3 parts, sequence of 3 parts. Hopefully, the middle part is less influenced by the previous and next sound. The initial part or the state 1 is influenced by the previous sound. The values of the distribution, values of the vowel A at the end is more influenced by the following sound. So we can represent one sound as a sequence of 3 parts. They call it a sequence of 3 states. And within each state also, you see, even within one state, it varies. Therefore, we represent it by a probability distribution. Such a model is called hidden Markov model, which is a sequence of 3 states, and each state is modeled by a probability distribution. And of course, there are details that even instead of representing the probability distribution of each state by a single Gaussian, you can represent it by a Gaussian mixture model. Such a model is called Gaussian mixture model, hidden Markov model. So this was one of the popular models that was used in the traditional way. So there's a statistical model, hidden Markov model, which is it represents a sequence of patterns, whereas Gaussian mixture model represents one particular part, but how the characteristics vary within that particular state or the part. Now, of course, this is the era of the neural network. So let's talk about the neuron. First, we talk about the natural neuron. Human brain has billions, 100 billions of neurons, and they are all interconnected. So this is the structure of one such neuron in the human brain. This neuron can be seen as consisting of 2 types. One is the cell body. Cell body, this is this center, which has a nucleus and some things surrounding it. And then there are several types of hair cells, cells that look, parts that look like hair, and there are 2 types of them. They are actually connectors. It's like the wires. These wires, short wires, are called dendrites. They take input from these dendrites are connected to the other neurons. So this neuron is one neuron is typically connected to thousands of other neurons. This neuron takes input from the other neurons. So these dendrites take input from the other neurons and send it to the nucleus. It does some processing. Once in a while, this neuron also sends some signals. through a long cell, and that is called axon, and that is connected to several other neurons. So these billions of neurons are always talking to each other. They keep receiving information. One neuron receives information from tens of thousands of other neurons. Once in a while, it also sends information to others. So this is connected neural network, if you wish. So now this is the natural neuron. What does the natural neuron do? Takes input, does some computation, once in a while sends output. An artificial neuron that is shown on the right side simulates the natural neuron. Let's say there are several inputs, x1, x2, x3, xd. D is the dimension of the feature vector or properties of one particular sound, let's say. And they are fed in here, and some computation is done here. What kind of computation is done? Linear weighted sum of these inputs are done. But what is weighted sum? That means sometimes what happens is, let's say I have some news and I want to ask my friend. I ask somebody says something. If it's a close friend whom I trust more, whatever friend's opinion, I give higher weightage. Whereas a stranger says reacts something, I give it a lower weightage. Similarly, these features or the evidence of various sounds are given different weights. X1 multiplied by W1 plus X2 multiplied by W2 plus X3 so on, XD W multiplied by WD. They are all added here, and some nonlinear functions are also used here, and the output is Y. So the Y is the output. This is similar to the natural neuron, sometimes sending signal to other guys. Now, in this particular case, we said that the output is only one. Why I should only one? When I want to do a classification, if there are K classes, then I should have K output neurons. Suppose the job of a lower KG kid is to recognize written A, B, C, D up to Z, then there will be 26 neurons in the case of the neural network, because there are 26 classes. The whatever written is could be any of the 26 classes. In this particular case, this neuron has capital K classes, and now the output of these neurons can further give on to another set of neurons. Then we call it as a neural network. So that is shown here in the right side. The input layer is turned. This picture is turned. So this is the input layer. It's shown here. This is the first layer of neurons that is shown here. So each neuron in the first layer collects input, gets input from the input layer, does some calculation, sends output. The output of each of these neurons are fed to the neurons in the next layer. And in this particular, this is the output layer. The output, there are only two classes, 0 or 1, yes or no, or true or false. Just binary classification, let's say. So here there are two layers of neurons. We call two neurons, although pictorially it appears three, because this is not, there is no computation here, it's just a connector, port. So the actual computations are taking place here and here. Therefore, there are two layers of neurons. This is called an artificial neural network. So in this particular case, there are two layers of neurons. We can feed the output of this to another set of neurons. For example, here, so this is the input layer. There is one layer. Output of these neurons are fed to the another layer of neurons. Output of these neurons are fed to the two neurons in the output side. Output layer. This is called output layer. This is called the input layer. The in-between layers are called hidden layers. For some specific reason, we will not go into that. So in this particular case, there are three layers, two hidden layers and one output layer. So why should we consider neural network at all? Earlier, we used a statistical model along with Gaussian mixture model. It used to model the properties distributions with the multiple peaks. Well, but why do we use deep neural network? A feed-forward neural network such as this, that the information starts from input and goes only on the right side to other layer with three or more hidden layers is called deep neural network. Deep. Why should we use deep neural network? The reason is the following. Gaussian mixture model is called a generative model. You might have heard of the generative language model. Gaussian mixture model is called a generative model because it represents the distribution of data well. Suppose the Gaussian mixture model of vowel A, it knows everything or most of the things about the A, but it knows nothing about other speech sound. Whereas deep neural network, on the other hand, is a discriminative model. It is not interested in representing how the A is there, but how A is different from O, how A is different from Ka, how A is different from N, and so on. So it says what is the uniqueness of the vowel A, which is different from others. So the uniqueness that helps in recognizing well, therefore it discriminates between different sounds. Therefore, deep neural network is called a discriminative model, and discrimination helps in classification. Given the speech data, whether it is vowel A, E, Ka, Ta, it is easier to recognize it because there are confusing sounds such as pa and pa, pal and pal, meaning changes. What did I do? When I say pal, when I say pal, after P I put a little bit of aspiration, pa, meaning change. But pa and pa are fairly similar. Therefore, in speech recognition, many times confusing sounds the similar sounds get confused, meaning changes. To reduce this confusion, a deep neural network, a discriminative model such as deep neural network is useful, and that was used. And when Gaussian mixture model, a statistical model, is replaced by a discriminative model called deep neural network, but sequential properties of the speech sound is still maintained by a statistical model, hidden Markov model. So this is a spectrogram, input spectrogram. Earlier, there were Gaussian mixture models, GMMs were representing sounds. Now, and output was, and the sequence of sounds was represented by HMM. So this remains same, input remains same, but instead of this Gaussian mixture model, now we have a deep neural network where there are several layers of hidden neurons here. So this was the model that was the DNN HMM was more successful than the GMM HMM, and it used to work with a few hours of training speech data. Well, now we talk about speech recognition, speech text. We talked about the models to represent the acoustic properties of the speech sound, speech wave. We didn't talk about the grammar or which sequence of sounds is a valid word in a language, or the language model we didn't talk, and that is also important in spoken language recognition. So in the language model, there are various types of language that is involved. That is, let's say a word pal means moment in Hindi. Pal doesn't mean anything in English or Telugu probably, I don't know. So which sequence of sounds make a syntax, make a word in a language is described by the lexicon. What kind of sequence of words can be spoken in a language? That is determined by syntax. For example, in English, I would say I ate an apple. I ate. I is noun, ate is verb, and apple is object. In Hindi, it's the other way around. Maine aam khaya. Khaya verb comes at the end. So different languages have different rules for sequence of words, of the parts of speech, and that is captured by the language model. When rule-based models didn't do well, people used to resorted to statistical models. Of course, these days, in the last one decade, we have gone beyond statistical model. We use the neural network to represent the language model also. Give large amount of textual data to the system and let the system learn what sequence of words are valid and what sequence of words are more probable. This language model itself is learned by a neural network. So far, what we still used was a hidden Markov model to represent a sequence of sounds. But it is still a statistical model. It makes some assumptions. And when the deep neural network came, a large amount of data was available and high computing resources were available. The concept of deep learning came. The number of hidden layers was not 5, 10, 20, and so on. It could increase. The number of parameters increased. With the large amount of data that is available on internet, we could train the system better. And that model, which did not use HMM at all, did a better job. And the latest, and of course, there were other models such as which capture. So far, whatever we talked about up to here is the GMM HMM. We take a short segment of speech, compute some features, and give it, and then output. And then every time we keep only one information about one short segment. On the other hand, speech is a sequence of sounds. Therefore, it is then the sounds are related. Therefore, it is better to model how the temporal property of the speech signal also. So such models were used. So in neural network, time delay neural networks, along with HMM was used, and then there were other models, transformers, encoder, decoder, and so on. So in this particular case, not only the coding model, but also the language model, everything is represented by a deep neural network. The big system. Input is a speech waveform, output is the text. Speech to text. Everything is done by neural network. What is actually done is this speech input is processed by something called encoder, and a high dimensional representation of the speech sounds and its relationship to previous and next speech sounds is embedded here. It's an embedded layer. Dimension can be 100, 200, and so on. So all these speech sounds and their relationships are stored in this high dimensional speech, embedded vector space, and then from there the transformation from the information in the embedded space to the corresponding text is done by the decoder. This is the encoder, this is the decoder. Encoder-decoder model. So it is called end-to-end ASR, where the speech is input, output is the text. There is no acoustic model separately, there is no language model separately. Everything is taken care by these big neural networks. It is also global optimization. It's a big system. It works well if there is enough training data. And this is this is just a chart of how the world error rate on the y-axis kept on decreasing as years progressed. Hidden Markov model and now deep neural networks. So we have covered the theoretical aspects of speech recognition at a very high level. Of course, there will be many other talks which will go deep into each of these parts. Or in this introductory talk, I'm just giving you an overview. And I'm concentrating on speech recognition, speech to text. Speech systems, text to speech is there, and one text in one language to text in another language in another script, machine translation is there. Various types of speech systems are there. Speech understanding is there, speaker recognition is there, various things are there. I'm focusing on text to speech, automatic speech recognition system. The title of my talk is Low Resource ASR. Indian languages, we said there were 119 languages spoken by at least 10,000 speakers, 22 scheduled languages. Scheduled languages are major languages spoken by, many of them are spoken by lakhs of people. But in addition to these 22 scheduled languages, there are something like 500 plus languages spoken in India. And only 119 languages are spoken by 10,000 or more speakers. Many languages are spoken by few thousand speakers and sometimes few hundred speakers. Some languages are lost because nobody speaks them anymore. So there are hundreds of languages in India which are endangered, means the number of people who speak that language is reducing, and these are called endangered languages of India. And they are mainly in hilly areas. That's understandable, because in hilly area, in the plain area, we come in contact with many people. So if I am in Delhi, I tend to speak Hindi because that is the local language. Although my native language may be different, I try to speak that language. So the major languages get higher importance, and slowly smaller languages are lost. For example, my son doesn't speak my mother tongue. What I spoke at home when I was small, he doesn't speak. So the number of speakers in my language, for example, has reduced. So see, and in hilly areas, many people these days come from hilly areas, plain for jobs and so on, and their children do not speak their languages. So the languages are vanishing. And they are mostly in hilly areas, here, or northeast India. Lots of them are there, maximum languages. And there are some languages even here also, wherever there are some hilly areas. So if the number of speakers is small, we need to do a speech recognition, we need their speech data, and also what was spoken. This sequence of sounds has to be written down and fed in electronic form, digital form, to the system. So we need to collect speech data, and collecting speech data from hilly speakers is a problem. So generally we get small amount of data, a few hours of data, maybe we may be able to collect it. In each case, good old statistical models would be useful if you have just a few hours of data. And Kali is a toolkit that does that. So what are the resources needed for a speech recognition system? Let's continue with the statistical approach, hidden Markov model approach with the GM. You need a wave file. You need to type it in what was spoken. Suppose I say Mera Bharat Mahan, it consists of 3 words, Mera space Bharat space Mahan, written in Devanagari script. Not all, but training, when we train acoustic model, we don't train at the word level, because there are millions of words and new words are being created and so on. Therefore, we build an acoustic model for each speech sound. Maybe 30, 40 sounds are there. Whereas the transcription is at the word level. So you need a pronunciation dictionary which converts, which says this word Bharat consists of sequence of 5 sounds, B, A, R, E, T. So that is called pronunciation dictionary. So let's look at each of these spoken language resources. First, we need audio files. Audio files along with the transcription. These are some of the sources of audio files for Indian languages. There is a Linguistic Data Consortium for Indian Languages, LDCIL. It is located in Central Institute of Indian Languages, Mysuru. And they collect speech data and make it available to people for nominal charges for researchers like this. And there are sources where speech data can be downloaded freely without paying any money. This is called open speech language resources, open speech and language resources. These languages, there are data, hundreds of hours of data that you can download. Not only speech data, but also the transcription, what was spoken in that particular wave file, that is also there. All India Radio is another source. They speak, they transmit, they read news. And not only do they read the news, but the corresponding text is also there, because news reader is actually reading a text in the native script. So the All India Radio provides not only the audio, but also the transcription. Then the Government of India, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, MeitY, that has sponsored several projects on speech area, and that also provides speech transcription lexicon. I will talk about it briefly. Gramvani is another NGO which has provided Hindi speech data, 120 hours of speech data from 4,000 speakers, large number of speakers, because The speech also varies from person to person, that we know. So we need data not from one speaker, but thousands of speakers, and it's provided. And then there are NGOs which collect speech data from the internet and build acoustic models, language models, and make it available to people. Vakyamsh is Xstep is an example of that. So in case of language model, there are different kinds of things. We need to combine evidence from the acoustic model as well as language model using this rule. That's okay. And the third resource that we need is so-called pronunciation dictionary. Let me go back here. For building an ASR, audio file and transcription needed. Many times it's available. What we need is how to, for a given word, what is the sequence of sounds? For example, if you say urban in English, U-R-B-A-N. When I was a kid, I read it as urban because U is generally spoken as U. So whereas in English, in the case of English, U, when it occurs in the word urban, it is pronounced as A. That is a rule. So that rule is not systematic. Fortunately, Indian scripts are very systematic. They are sort of phonetic language. There are certain pronunciation rules, but they can be easily put into the form of a set of rules. And a dictionary of words as a sequence of sounds can be generated. For example, the word age, there are two aksharas, A and Ge. A is written as W-A, long A. Ge consists of consonant G and a vowel A. Similarly, Aj, it is not Aja. Aj, the final A should be not be pronounced. So it is there. Abbas, double B is there. For example, this one, when I first learned Hindi, I read this as Ahale because I read it letter by letter. But the pronunciation wise, it is Pehle. So there are certain rules of pronunciation. When Ha is preceded by A, then this should be pronounced like this. That's a rule there. Even some words, let's say this word science, in Marathi it is pronounced as Vijnan. In South Indian languages also it is pronounced as Vijnan. In Hindi it is pronounced as Vigyan, written also differently, Vigyan. Therefore, we need to be able to represent the words in terms of vowels and consonants of Indian languages. And fortunately, many of the Indian languages share common vowels. The sound A is common in most of the Indian languages. An exception is in Bangla, for example. In Bangla, suppose I want to say Arun, I will say Arun. Whereas in Bangla, people say Orum. The tongue goes backwards, or it becomes a little rounded. So the A there is pronounced slightly differently. We give it a separate label. So for each of these vowels and consonants, which are common to Indian languages, a common set of labels were given. It's called common label set. I call it as Indian language speech labels. So each word, how it is how it is pronounced is written as a sequence of labels. This is also called a pronunciation dictionary. So also called lexica. So we follow the Devanagari alphabet. Let's say look at the Devanagari alphabet. These are the vowels here, and these in red letter are the corresponding speech labels. Similarly, consonants. These are the stop consonant, and these are the other consonants. There are some rules that are followed that has been taken care of. There are some special requirements in some languages. For example, in Rajasthani, there are implosives. What is an implosive? When I say apa, pa, my lips when open, air comes out of my mouth. Whereas in Rajasthani, there are implosives. When my lips open, air is sucked into the mouth, not coming out of the mouth, sucked in. They are called implosives. So rules, so labels for such sounds are also has to be provided. And there are some languages specifically in more in northeastern India, which are called tonal languages. There are Tibeto-Burman languages. Example is Mani. Manipuri language, or Adi Nagaland languages in Nagaland, and this is the language in Bhutan, spoken in Bhutan. There are these are called tonal languages. What is a tonal languages? I don't know, I don't have an example, but let me give an example. Let's say Pal, you say Pal, that's a normal one. Pal, then it is called a high tone. It is I spoken as whereas the I is spoken as it is rising tone, whereas high pitch, rising pitch, falling pitch, rising and falling. So the same sound, but spoken with different pitch contour, pitch variation as a function of time. Those are called tones, and the same sound, same sequence of sound makes different meanings. So we need to give information about the tone also. So we also have tone labels, and these are shown here, and information for various languages, Indian languages are written here. Okay, that's so I completed about an hour. Now in the next 15 minutes, I'll quickly talk about the speech systems that are being built for Indian languages. The major push came from the MeitY, Ministry of Information and Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. They have a mission called National Language Technology Mission. And in the first part, they concentrated on some, they sponsored a project in which IIT Madras was the project leader, and there were 22 institutions involved in this consortium project. They included various IITs, IAC, NITs, and developers like CDAC, and private universities like SSN, KL University, and many others. And models based on these are available at this particular place. So what I want to do is to go to that place. So I go on. This is called Springs Indian Language Models and Data for Indian Languages. Professor Umesh leads the consortium now. And if you go to this site, you will see label here, data set. So if you click on the data set, you will see manually transcribed Indian speech corpus. Not only speech data, but also their transcriptions are available for various languages. There are two, they were released in 2 installments, 2 sets of data are available for these languages. And how much is data is there? For example, Assamese language, it is 50 hours of speech data. Bengali language, 374 hours of speech data. This is the release 1. So if you look at, let's say, Gujarati, 175 hours of speech data was released in the release 1, and another it's around 60 hours of speech data was released in the 2. So totally around 270 hours of speech data of Gujarati is available. You see that these are all in hundreds of hours of speech data in major languages, and data was collected by private partners, companies, and data was curated. They are available in various sources. Now, not only they allow you to download the data, but they also give various data models. Let's look at that. So models are available. They are trained using not the HMM, but the neural network, deep neural network, various types of deep neural networks. This is, for example, wave to vec. This is data to vec, and this is uses Hubert model. So, not only trained data is available, not only data is available for you to build the system, but you may not be able to build the system because it's large amount of data, it requires GPU-based machines, and a lot of time and computing power. So on the other hand, if your goal is to build an application, you download the data from this site, you have to register and download it. And these models are available for various languages that you see here. Lots of various types of models. Some models may work for some language better than the other model. That you can figure out which for your language which model works best and build an application. Not only have they built application, but also they have built demonstrations, speech to text, or some ASR, and text to speech, and text to text, script one script another script, and it includes video to video. Video, there's audio that is spoken, one data in one is spoken in Hindi, and somebody in Telugu has to listen to it. The corresponding speech in Telugu will be played instead of the Hindi speech. Speech to speech translation. Speech to speech translation. That is, I speak Hindi, and if you choose the language as Mizoram, it will appear as Mizoram. So let's look at that particular. These demos are available. So let me go to the demo. Let me go to the speech to speech demo. For example, I will use the source language as Telugu. I don't know Telugu, but I'm in land where Telugu is spoken. Let me choose the target language as Hindi. I assume that Hindi is recognized by, heard by, understood by almost everyone. And here also there are two models. IIT, there are two models which does the speech translation. One is from the IIIT Hyderabad, and another is from the Spring Lake IITM. So let's choose the default one. So, and my gender is male. I can upload a speech file and get it translated, or I can speak live. This is a live demo. So let me see, let me do a demo here and see how it works. So I'm going to speak Telugu. I'm not a Telugu native speaker, and I want it to be translated into Hindi, and I should be able to play it. Okay. So let me click on the mic button. Naku Telugu Radu. Stopped. So the Naku Telugu Radu is what I spoke. The waveform is here. I can play it. And you can see that text to, this was the speech. Speech was converted into Telugu text here. Naku Telugu Radu. Okay. And so this is ASR. It is speech to text. This is Telugu language. Now this in sentence, Telugu sentence is translated to Hindi sentence by machine translation. This is a text to text. Naku Telugu Radu, English meaning is I don't know Telugu. I shouldn't say that in Telugu, but it works sometimes when I go to bazaar. So the corresponding translation is Mujhe Telugu nahi aati hai. So let's listen. And not only text is there, but also its waveform is there. Let me play the waveform. So I spoke Telugu, and the person listened in other person who doesn't know Telugu, but he hears it in Hindi. So he can speak Hindi, and I will hear it in Telugu. So this is the speech-to-speech translation. You can download these files and check that they are actually here. So let me play it again. Telugu. Translation corresponding Hindi. Of course, there are various languages here. You can choose any of them, lots of them. Play around with that. That's where I stop. Demos are there. Those are okay. So I did talk about the speech project sponsored by the MAITI. These are the things that demo that I showed. Various demos are also there. You can look at it. And this is part of the National Language Translation Mission, also called Bhashini, which is to do with anything to do with the human language. Note the kinds of things that they are supporting here. Sorry, it's here. So let me go to that Bhashini setup. I guess you can see here. These are the various kinds of services that they provide. They provide automatic speech recognition in some languages, neural machine translation, text-to-speech, optical character recognition. Printed text is recognized, written text is recognized, handwritten text is also recognized. So, and it can do transliteration. Somebody writes in English, it can be translated into Devanagari script, and so on. And so the list of the services that are provided are here. Lots of services provided in various languages. In which languages they are provided? The list of the languages is here. So you can build systems, speech systems for Indian languages, at least for the major Indian languages. That's the point that I wanted to convey, that significant progress has been made for in the case of the major languages. Even major languages, we have hundreds of hours of speech data. But if you look at English, there are 10,000 hours, 1 lakh hours, 10 lakh hours of speech data that is used to train their models. So bigger the data, bigger is the model, more powerful is the model. But we have only a few hundred hours of data per language. But our languages are similar. They have similar sound. That's why we use the common label set. So can we exploit, utilize this, and take our advantage of this fact that even though we speak Telugu or Hindi, the sounds are very similar. Therefore, we collect the speech data of all the languages and build one common system. And then from that common Indic language system, which is trained with large amount of data, you adapt it to your language. Suppose your language is Punjabi, you take your Punjabi 100 hours of data and adopt this built system to Punjabi language. So that is the adaptation part, adaptation of a multilingual speech system, which could be end-to-end, completely neural network with limited data. And that is what is being done by many people. And we did talk of speech labels for all Indian languages, common speech labels. We did that 2 decades ago. And even recently, even in the era of deep neural networks, people do come out with the cross-lingual speech representations. This is an NGO, Ek-Step Foundation, which has come with their own set of labels, and they have built systems. It's called Vakyamsh. There are systems for automatic speech recognition, text-to-speech, GitHub available, various languages, and they use a pre-trained model using the common label set that they define this cross-lingual speech representation, not label set, cross-lingual speech representation, embedded model. And they fine-tune it. Hindi, for example, is fine-tuned with 4,200 hours of speech data. And that model you can download it. And similarly, for example, if you take Dogri language, it is fine-tuned with 55 hours of data. Not all. So in addition to that, there's a text-to-speech model, also TTS model also. These are, so you can download it and use it. So now I come to the final part, that is the low resource language. That was the title. So endangered languages of India. We saw this map. Government of India has recognized the need to preserve languages. It's our heritage. So they have sanctioned, at least I'm aware of one major consortium project that is sanctioned, that builds speech system for these languages, these 4 languages. See, this is the Vindhya Hills, and Lambadi is spoken in various parts of the India. Here also they are spoken. And this part is hilly area between Odia and Andhra Pradesh. There the Kui and Mundari tribal language is spoken. Soliga is a language that is spoken in Nilgiri Hills, Uti, Kodaikanal, that kind of area. That's the Soliga language. So Government of India has realized the need for preserving languages, Indian languages, and support. And what will happen is, these are all tribal languages. They are tribals living in hilly area. They do generally avoid contact with the plain people. They live on their own independently. But the advantage of these internet or UPI pay or anything like that, they can't use it because they cannot speak the language. They cannot read. Suppose they are in Andhra Pradesh, they cannot read the Telugu text. So on the other hand, if there is a system which speaks all the instruction in their language, then they will be able to use the mobile phone and get the benefit of the modern technology. That is the idea of building speech systems in the languages. These are the 4 languages. And this is built by a consortium of 4 institutions: IIT Dharwad, IIT Hyderabad, IIT Bhubaneswar, and IIT Dharwad. Speech-to-speech translation for tribal languages using deep learning framework. Notice that these are the tribal languages, so it's very difficult to go and collect data. You need a contact person who can speak a little bit of their language and our language also, or the contact language. So they are in the process of building speech-to-speech translation system. For example, here is a Soliga speaker, and he wants to speak a Lambani speaker. This guy knows only Soliga, he doesn't know Lambani. This guy knows only Lambani, does not know Soliga. So he speaks some Soliga speech, speech in the source language, which could be Emme Badili Ata Adidda. He spoke it, and this is the corresponding transcription in Kannada script. So I can read it. Emme Badili Ata Adidda. Speech to text. In text in the contact language. No, the tribal language, many languages do not have their own script, but they use the script of the local state. This is Kannada. From this, it is translated into the corresponding text in Lambani, Angodo or Rocha, something, and that is spoken in Lambani speech. So this is the speech translation. This requires 2 kinds of work. One is resource creation, because as I said, collecting speech data and also translation. It's not just recording, but somebody who knows the language has to listen to it and type it in. Suppose somebody spoke the Soliga speech, somebody who knows Soliga speech should also know how to use a computer and type it in Kannada script, because that is spoken in near Karnataka. So this resource creation is a huge task, but that is being done. And secondly, build a speech-to-speech translation as not as an end-to-end system to begin with. You can put it as a sequence of 3 systems: ASR, followed by machine translation, followed by text-to-speech. And of course, one can also use the end-to-end system. So the first job is to resource creation. What they did was they took lots of sentences from English, somewhat simpler sentences. That's a primary language. They translated into Kannada, the local language where Lambani and Soliga are spoken. They translated that English text to Odia, which is the local language for Kui language and Mundari language. These are the tribal languages. So text data is prepared. Then these the tribal people, many of them may not be able to read. In each case, somebody who can read Telugu, he'll speak the Kui language, and the other person repeats it, and this is recorded, segmented, and transcribed. So various modules of speech-to-speech translation are here. They are built, ASR system is built for all the languages. They also used end-to-end systems. Of course, machine translation from English to the 4 tribal languages, and TTS systems are also developed. So this is a summary of the kind of work that is done for endangered languages in India with the low resources. Now the trend is, because deep neural networks requires large amount of thousands of hours of data, how can you build systems using 5 hours of data or 10 hours of data, still use a neural network? And that's where people have attempted using the adaptation approach. The current trend is speech recognition with less data. This is a paper, this was published 6 months ago. Less is more, accurate speech recognition and translation without web scale data, large amount of data. So people are interested in building systems even when a small amount of data is available for a new language. That is the trend, and this is a challenge. This STTP is about challenges and opportunities. This is a challenge for various languages that you see here. There are lots of hundreds of languages. Lots of research scholars can work on it. follow the framework followed by, for example, consortium here, or the approach that is followed by these people, combine them, come up with the innovations and build systems for these resource language. So that is the summary of my talk, and I stop here. Thank you.